therapy or occupational therapy.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. Florida Agriculture in the Classroom is a nonprofit organization that connects kids to healthy food and Florida agriculture through educational resources, teacher professional development, grants, and other farm-to-school programming. FAITC has a vision to ensure every student in pre-K through 12th grade education is aware and appreciates agriculture and natural resources in Florida. I am Becky Sponholtz, and I am the Executive Director of Florida Agriculture in the Classroom, and we are hosting today's virtual farm field trip. Jen Morgenthau, our education specialist, is with us today behind the scenes on site at the farm. Tiffany Torres, our state school garden specialist, is also with us today, and she will be monitoring the YouTube chat. A few housekeeping items for you today. Most of you are probably used to Zoom meetings where you have access to turn your video and microphone on and off. Today, we are using Zoom webinar where you will not have those features. If you are able, please rename yourself so that we know the teacher's name, grade level, or school name. We would love for you all to ask questions throughout the entire tour, and we will get to as many of them as possible as we learn about Erickson Farm. To ask a question, you will use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window. You will see that chat feature. You will see that the chat feature has been disabled, and you will only be using the Q&A. Any questions that we do not have time for will be answered via email after the tour. If you are joining us on YouTube today and have questions, just type them into the chat section and we will be monitoring that as well. At this time, I'm going to pass this over to Kim Erickson to start our tour.
Good morning. I am Kim Erickson, and welcome to Erickson Farm. I am a fourth generation Floridian and farmer, and I help manage this farm with my father, Dale, and my sister, Krista, and her son, Brendan, is now also working here part-time in the summer and in between classes. We are on the shore of Lake Okeechobee, been here for over 100 years. I'm standing here in front of a mango tree, which is primarily what we grow. We're a small farm, about 60 acres. About 40 acres is in mangoes. And then we also have sapodillas, which get ready in January, and lychees, which get ready usually end of May, 1st of June, as well as the avocados and a few carambola that we're going to look at today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at the avocados, because they are the product that we have that's in season at this time. So avocados, they become more popular in the United States in the last decade or so, but they've been around for a really long time. They come from South Central Mexico, and we know that they were farmed by the Incas and the Mayans, and they've been domesticated, both highlands and lowland varieties. We'll talk a little bit more about that. At this point in time, there are at least 400 different varieties of avocados worldwide, so quite a few. And just on our farm, we have about 20 different varieties. And in terms of varieties, the one you're most familiar with probably, and this came from the grocery store here, is the Hass avocado. The avocados you see in the United States primarily, most of them are probably grown in Mexico. This is one of the highland varieties. They like to grow at elevation, whereas the ones that grow well in Florida are ones that were more domesticated in the islands. So there are some differences between those. Most of the Florida varieties are a lot larger than the Hass. So these are some of the late season varieties. One of the variables is the season. So the early ones start coming in June, July, and these are the mid to late season. So this one is a tonnage, and it has kind of the um, similar texture as a Hass. It's got that pear shape to it. That's also another name for avocados. You might hear them called avocado pears or alligator pears. And that's actually a name that was given to them by the Spanish explorers, because when they encountered them in Mexico, the closest thing they could compare them to in their experience were the pear trees back in Spain. This is a hull. This monster is a Marcus. Sometimes we refer to them as Marcus pumpkins because of their shape. They look very pumpkin-like. This is a Black Prince. Choquette. I just blanked on this one. This is a Herman. And this one starts with the C. Catalina. Sorry. And I found this little guy yesterday. This is a new tree. This one is a Eulala, developed at University of Louisiana Lafayette. That's the name. The size is more similar to the Hass, and it turns purple as it gets ripe. Most Florida avocados will stay green in color as they ripen. Some do change. There are some that turn red, some that turn purple. Regardless of the variety of the avocado, whether it's Florida avocado, California avocado, Mexican avocado, whatever color they turn, they all get soft to the touch when they're ripe. So if you're trying to figure out if it's time to eat it or not, that's how you tell. They get soft. In terms of the varieties and how we get the varieties, like most fruit, avocados do not grow true to seed. I don't know if any of you have tried sprouting an avocado seed. They do really well. You can put them in a pot. You can use a little toothpicks and put them in the glass of water, and they will grow a root and sprout for you. But you basically have a new variety then, because they probably cross-pollinated with something. So they get grafted to get the variety that you want. You may, if you've been looking at having an avocado tree, you may have heard of A types and B types. It used to be a lot bigger deal than it is now. Basically, when the avocados bloom, they don't have one big flower. They've got like a whole clump of bloom that comes out on the ends of the branches. And in that bloom, there are male and female flowers and parts. They don't necessarily open at the same time of day. So if you have both kinds, it can up the production. It used to be a really big deal with some of the older varieties. With the newer varieties, it's not really as necessary. So they kind of fall into what we consider the self-pollinating category. So if you have one tree by itself in the yard, you still get a nice crop off of it. All you need is your little friendly pollinators, your honeybees, solitary bees, even flies can be good pollinators. Get in there and spread the pollen around, and then you get your little fruits. So we're going to take a second to show you how to dig into an avocado. And I discovered this morning that I always take home the sad little ones. So I'm going to take a second to also mention, if you're at the store trying to choose an avocado, what it is you might be looking at if you see something that looks unusual on them. That is just I think this one has a black spot like that is usually anthracnose. That's just a little fungus. Usually it's not a really deep issue. This is basically caused by the wind. It's where the fruit was next to a branch, and when the wind blows, it rubs on it. So that's what caused that. It's not a deep issue in the fruit. Same thing with this one, was rubbing on a tree. So it's pretty rough looking, but it'll eat just fine. In the middle of any avocado, there's one big seed. That's the only thing you have to really be aware of when you cut into them. And I don't know that there is a right way to do it, a right way or a wrong way to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it. Works for me. So basically the first thing I do, yes.
A question came in before you start cutting into that. Somebody had a question about the soils and what does the soil look like there for your trees to grow in?
Absolutely. Okay. So we are in the EAA. We have the black muck soil. So it's very high in nutrients in and of itself. And we'll get into we're going to talk about the details of growing in it, but basically it's very high in nutrition. So our soil right here where we're at is a little bit of a combo of muck and sand because we're near the old lake shore. Avocados do like to be dry. They don't like their roots wet. So that is one thing to consider in growing them. Did you have another question?
That's it for right now. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. Okay, I will mention also with avocados and any other fruit, make sure you wash them before you cut into them. We're not planning on eating these, even though I already washed them this morning. Even though we're peeling it, your knife is still going through the skin and into the fruit that you're going to be eating. So it's always important to wash it off. So I basically just go around, all the way around to get into the seed. And then poof, splits right open. Okay, so this is the seed. You can plant that baby right there if you want to see how a tree does. One really easy thing about Florida avocados is when they're ripe, almost all the varieties peel really easy. I find it easier to peel like a half at a time, so I go ahead and cut them in half, and then you can just peel the skin right off. So much easier than spooning it out methods. Okay, so see, this is my sad little baby had a little spot, so we'll get rid of that. One probably most popular way avocados are consumed in the United States is guacamole. If you're making guacamole at this point, you just need some chunks and start mashing it up. They're great in smoothies. You actually don't get any of the flavor, you get all the health benefits. Avocados have become really popular in a lot of ways because they're high in the healthy fats. They've got a lot of vitamin E. They're also high in protein and fiber. They actually have more potassium than bananas. Another thing that has become popular is the avocado toast, in which case, once you get it cut there, you can just slice off little pieces and then you have those to put on top of your toast if you want to go that way. You can cut wedges, and if it's a little on the green side, you can batter them and they can actually fry them up like fries. Lots of different options for how you can eat those. The other thing I will mention too is if you try an avocado and you don't particularly like the flavor, don't chalk it up to I don't like avocados, because the different varieties do taste different. So if you don't like the one you tried, give it a bit, but try another kind later because you may like the other variety better.
Kim, you answered a question that just came through about the flavors. Are some sweeter than others or more bitter, sour, those kind of things?
Okay. Just I am not the best at describing flavors, but I wouldn't say they really fall on the bittersweet category. Most people talk about them being buttery or nutty. They are definitely not bitter. Or if they're ripe, they're not bitter. They might be a little chalky or bitter if they're green. Haven't tried that. It's a very mellow flavor, honestly. It's a light flavor. Some of the varieties, if it's a really rainy year, can be kind of almost washed out in flavor, in my opinion. So there are some varieties that I don't like because of that. This is where your biggest difference too comes in between your Florida avocados and like your Haas type avocados, is in that fat content. Florida avocados have they're a lot lower in fat. There's less fat per gram in a Florida avocado than a Haas avocado. So those are probably the biggest difference in flavors between those.
And which one's your favorite?
Oh man, I kind of have favorites as the season goes along. Early in the season, I'm a big fan of the Duprees. The tonnage is one of my favorites. It's got a real nutty flavor, fabulous for guacamole. That's the one I usually freeze for smoothies. I haven't tried this little guy, so I can't honestly say. We've got another one that looks kind of like this, is a smidgen bigger early in the season, called a Brogdon. It's pretty delicious. I don't know. Yeah. Um, I don't know that I really have one favorite. Probably Dupuis if I had to pick one.
Thank you.
Okay. We were going to talk a little bit about growing them, and we're going to walk over towards the carambolas, I believe. Okay, we're going to take a look at one of the trees. This is a choquette tree. It's one of the later varieties. This one has a pretty heavy crop on it this year, so they will actually get even bigger than that. I've seen them practically football size. And as give it a few weeks and some of those fruit comes off, and the ones that remain will probably be even larger. In terms of growing them, they're relatively low maintenance as fruit crops go. You have a little bit of fungus issues with the anthracnose. That can be cleared up with copper occasionally. They will get some red spider mite, and a soap will take care of that. Avocados in general are being challenged by a new disease called laurel wilt. It's spread by a little bug. They call it the ambrosia beetle, is its name. And if your tree gets it, it'll be dead in a couple of days, just bang. There's not much you can do for them in your yard. There are some inoculations that you can use for them commercially. So that's really the biggest challenge right now in the industry for growing avocados. In general, they are tropical, so they're not a big fan of cold weather. They need some. Most of the varieties do get damaged at freezing. There are, however, some cold tolerant varieties that you can grow further north in Florida. They can actually handle down into the 20s, which is kind of unusual for a tropical fruit, so that's an option. Hurricanes are always an issue. They can take them out. So whenever you get the crop off the trees, the next thing we do is trim the trees so that we can keep them down to where we can keep them sprayed and harvested, and to reduce that wind resistance in case we do get a tropical storm or a hurricane, that it won't blow the trees over. So that's a big thing. In terms of the winter with the cold weather, I don't know if you've had a shot of the irrigation lines around. We don't actually have to water any of the trees once they get established. Our water table is high enough for that. We use those for cold protection. If we have a freeze and it's not windy, then the water temperature is warmer than the wind and the ground temperature. And so those little jets basically end up producing a fog that comes up, and the canopy of the tree holds it in, and it helps keep the temperature just a wee bit above freezing.
Kim, somebody asked, actually a few people asked, how long does it take? So once you graft the plant and plant it in the ground, how quickly will you get avocados?
Good question. Okay, if you do grow that seed and decide to try out your new variety, you're looking at about 7 years. You save time when you graft. It's probably, you'll get a couple of fruit in 2 to 3 years. We usually consider it about 7 to 8 before they start producing enough that we consider a mature tree in a grove. So it's a pretty slow process compared to, like, if you have a tomato plant. You're looking at several years, but you can cut some off with the grafting.
And how do you harvest these the avocado off the tree?
Excellent. All of the tropical fruits are hand harvested. If they happen to be low enough, you can grab them literally with your hand. That is an option. The ones that are up higher, we use a pole that has at the end of it a basket, and there's a little razor blade in the tip of the basket that slices the stem, and the little basket catches the fruit.
And would you recommend a teacher growing a Florida avocado in their school garden? And if so, what is the easiest?
I do recommend avocados for school gardens because they are relatively low maintenance. You also get fruit off during when kids are in school, so that's always a bonus. um, it tends to be a tree that most people are not allergic to, another bonus. And in terms of choosing varieties, I would just say you don't want an early one because you probably don't want it coming off during the summer. So any of the later varieties, and beyond that, it would depend more on where your school is at. If you happen to be further north, then you might want to look at the varieties that have more of a cold tolerance. If you're further south, then honestly, it's whatever sounds good.
And what is it says what is the productive life of your avocado tree? So how many years is it producing good fruit?
As long as the tree stays healthy, they will continue to produce. So they don't have like a replacement cycle. All of the trees that we have here, mangoes, avocados, lychees, the sapodilla, as long as the trees stay healthy, they will continue to produce. I don't know that there's an upper limit. I know for sure in mangoes in India, there are groves that are over 400 years old. So you just have to keep taking care of them.
And my last avocado question for right now is why do they have different shapes and sizes?
Why do they have different shapes and sizes? Oh, I honestly don't know the details of the genetics on that. I mean, they were domesticated from the original place, and people just planted, the seeds and got those new varieties and liked the size and or the flavor that came from them, and so that variety got selected, so it got named and grafted and kept. But I think like any other thing, if you want big fruit, then you probably try to cross pollinate two large fruit. If you want a small fruit, you try to cross pollinate two smaller fruit. Um, Fortunately, not my area of expertise.
Okay, thank you. All right, that is all the avocado questions I'm seeing for right now. So if you want to walk on to the carambola, we'll go there next.
Okay, sure. This is another great tree for a school garden. A lot of people will also just grow them ornamentally because it's just a really pretty tree. They basically grow like weeds in Florida, very, very low maintenance. They actually don't like to get spray on them for the most part. Um, these originated in Southeast Asia, and there are you're going to say that? Okay. Basically, when you're looking at carambolas, you're going to find that there are sour carambolas and sweet carambolas. Usually, the sour carambolas get used as like marinades. You probably don't want to bite into one of those. And then the sweet carambolas are good for just eating fresh, like fruit, or you can actually make like pickles and chutney or pies if you want to get fancy with it. Um, let's see. They're kind of novel in the sense that, as you can see on the trees right now, we've got bloom, we've got tiny fruit, we've got small fruit, we've got completely mature ripe fruit. They start just left to their natural tendencies. They usually start coming off sometime in July, and they will continue to produce through January or until we get a good freeze, depending on the year, or really strong wind. Sometimes they'll put them in their dormant state. Although I believe you can trim them to try to reduce that period in between, but just in their own natural cycle, that's how long they just continue to produce new fruit. Um, they are okay. In terms of varieties, I don't know how many there are worldwide. We have mostly here two Thai varieties. They have cute names. We've got a Phueng Tung and a Shrikumbangam, and they look the same. These are Phueng Tungs. And then this is actually the kind you're probably more likely to see in the grocery store. This is a carry. It looks a lot like an argan as well. In my opinion, these are a little bit sweeter. They will be, these you really want to watch and make sure they get a nice orange to them to make sure that they're sweet. These will get a darker yellow, but they will be sweet at this stage as well. So you don't have to wait that last little bit. Carambola is entirely edible. It's a lot like a grape. You can just eat the whole thing. Texture is actually a lot like a grape too. It's really juicy. And you can also cut them up, and we're going to look at that in a minute. This is usually what you're cutting off if you've gotten one from a grocery store. That is basically where it's the skin's just a little tough because it's been bruised. This one, in this case, you got bruised because it was next to a tree, it rubbed up against it, but also in packaging and shipping, they get bruised. And so sometimes you want to cut that off, but you certainly don't have to. Now, you may have also heard them called starfruit. And if you don't know why, I probably should have brought a bigger knife for this. If you cut straight through them in little slices, they look like little stars. They also call them five fingers. In Australia, maybe some other places, I'm not sure. If you can just grab them and eat them like an apple. You can slice them up real pretty and make a nice fruit plate. You can eat the whole thing. If you're just going to sit down and munch on them, or if I'm freezing them to make smoothies, what I normally do is cut the ribs off, because that middle part is where the little seeds are. And it's a tiny bit pithy, but you can just slice the ribs right off, and you can either eat those, or if I'm freezing them for smoothies, I'll usually cut them in half and then freeze the little chunks. So any way you want to go about it will certainly work. They are surprisingly low in sugar, even though they're sweet. They've got kind of a sweet tart flavor, but definitely more sweet. And they're also really high in vitamin C. So,
Okay, a couple questions have come through.
Mhm.
The first one, I don't know if you know this, but do you know why they're shaped like a star?
No, I have no idea.
How do you plant a star fruit? Is it similar to the avocado where you have to graft?
To get a variety, they do have to be grafted. They plant the seeds to get the seedlings, but then you need the budwood off of a variety to get the same thing again.
And how do you know when they're sweet?
Color on carambolas, it's color. You can always wait till they're a darker yellow orange, like these two are, if you're not sure what variety it is. And those are definitely going to be sweet. Unless it's the sour variety, and I don't really honestly know how you tell the difference other than what tree it came off of.
And how long does it take to grow and then ripen?
I have not timed that. They do grow pretty quick, from bloom to fruit. I don't really know. It's quick compared to everything else. I would say just probably a couple months.
And somebody would like to know how they're harvested.
Star fruit are harvested by hand because they are so delicate. They do. I mean, look at the shape. These little fins, they just break and they bruise so easily. So they are all picked by hand. If you can't reach them from the ground, this is the one instance where we will use a ladder to get up to them.
And there's been, I know you've said a lot that the fruit are very delicate and you have to definitely harvest by hand. So how do you sell and who do you sell your produce to with it being that way?
Okay, just in general, as a small farm, we diversify. So we do sell some of our fruits, and this is across all of the different crops. We do sell some wholesale, usually to specialty grocery stores. We ship, with the exception of the Carambola. It's still a bit delicate for that. But the mangoes, lychees, avocados, we ship UPS straight to people's homes or offices. And then we sell a surprising amount right here out of the farm stand where people come and pick them up during the summer. We're open regular hours. This time of year, we're open by appointment. So we basically try to make it available to as many people as we can. We are a little too small to be able to meet the supply demands of like a Publix. So we have smaller markets than that, but we try to diversify across the different types.
And I know you talked a little bit about the upkeep of trees.
Mhm.
And so for all of your different varieties, I'm going to ask a multiple questions so you can kind of just go. What are the seasons? When
Mhm,
do you have to prune or trim?
mhm.
Okay, those are my two questions for right now, and then I'll come back.
Sure. Okay. So most of the fruit bloom, with the exception of the carambola, in the spring, um, or probably winter was what most people would consider it. So the mangoes, the avocados, the lychees all bloom in the spring, right after they get enough of a cold snap that triggers them to say, "Hey, that was winter. It's time to bloom." So anywhere between January and March, they start blooming. Mangoes start getting ripe in June, and with the early varieties, and they'll go through August, sometimes through September. Avocados start getting ripe in usually July, and they will go into November, sometimes occasionally through December. The sapodillas actually bloom, I believe, during the summer. They're an offset to that. And the harvest on those is usually right after New Year's. We start harvesting January, and that goes through February or March, depending on the crop. And we talked about the carambola, then they're a little continuous. They start July and they usually go through January, February, whenever we get that cold snap. Um, Pruning on all of them take place after you harvest the crop, whenever its off season is. So with the mangoes, we usually try to trim them as quickly as possible after we finish harvesting. This year, it was early. We were trimming in September. Um, it's a combo of you want the fruit off the trees, but then you want to get the size down. And with the mangoes, we want to get them down because at that point we're in hurricane season. So the sooner the better. And you want to give them a chance to get that new growth out before we have a possibility of having a cold snap. Sure. Oh, okay. So the pruning just depends on when the fruit gets ready. So after we finish the harvest is when you prune.
And just like they asked with the avocado, Mrs. Hess class wants to know how many years once you plant a star fruit will it be before you start to get fruit?
They grow so fast. I've seen fruit on them in the pots in the nursery. So you'll get a couple fruit probably that first year. Then obviously the bigger the tree gets, the more fruit you get.
This is a good question because I'm curious too. Can you make anything with star fruit like pie? I know you talked about putting it in smoothie, but do people make jellies, pies, that kind of stuff with it?
Absolutely. I have made jelly and I have made pie with it.
Is it possible to get one of the cameras to go back over and do an up close of what the seeds look like inside the carambola?
Let's see if I can find a seed and we can take a look at it. Okay, this is a little bit more mature. The seeds are going to be somewhere here in this middle section. I think there you go. There's your carambola seed.
And I know you talked about grafting and wanting to have that kind of tree, but can a teacher, can they in their classroom plant that seed right there and get, like, will it grow a tree?
It will grow a tree. What I don't know on carambolas is like I know with mango trees or avocado trees, if you plant the seed, you will eventually get a fruit, whatever kind it is, but it takes a lot longer. I don't know what impact not grafting would have on the carambola. They kind of tend to be pretty strong trees, so my guess is it wouldn't be nearly as long.
Okay. Well, so that is so fascinating. I love star fruit and they are a neat fruit, but we now have some questions about the other stuff. So, and I wanted
Okay.
to hold off until you got through that. So somebody asked, what is your strongest market? So what do you sell the most?
Mangoes. We have the most trees. We have the oldest customers and the strongest market for the mangoes.
And
We've
how old is your oldest mango tree?
Our oldest mango tree is about 100 years old now. It's way down on the other end of the farm. Um, it was, we're not entirely sure when it was planted, but it was put in its present spot in the 1920s after one of the hurricanes. It was a little further out. Our elevation actually drops off a little as you go out the grove. And we had some flooding. So my great grandfather took his canoe out there and drug it up here and replanted it in its current spot after one of the hurricanes in the 20s.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about how the farm started and how the crops have changed since you began in the early 1900s and why?
Sure. Well, we've been here since 1911. My great grandfather did several different things. He was a fisherman. Uh, um, he built the local school and a hotel. That's how he got out here. They started farming actually by growing amaryllis bulbs from Montgomery Ward, mail order. And then after that, they got into winter vegetables. We had peppers and green beans, I know for sure. I think some squash. Um, then when sugarcane came in, we looked at that, but we didn't have quite enough. Our farm wasn't big enough for that to work here, so we needed something more high value. Um, Basically, all of the tropical fruits we grow are what they call high value. They take a lot of intensive labor and work, but they can support a family with less acreage. So they started with avocados, and we had a lot of avocados. Our water table came up, and I mentioned avocados don't like their roots to be wet. They do suffer from a phytophthora root rot. So we replaced the avocados with mango trees at that point in time. Uh, then to stay in business, to stay competitive, our biggest competition basically comes from Mexico and the islands. And when I was a kid, it became really challenging to stay in business with the NAFTA trade agreements. So we started bringing in different varieties. On the ripe mangoes, we have about 50 different varieties. And so it's a very slow selection process, but we select varieties that are really, really delicious and also that are a little too fragile to handle the import process so that we can provide a superior product that's grown right here in Florida in the USA um, and sell it to our customers. And it reminds them of the delicious, juicy fruit they had when they were growing up, wherever that was.
Um, Miss Norman's class asked if the 100-year-old trees still produce fruit. That's a great question.
It most definitely does. Um, and it's kind of a cool tree in the sense of we talked about grafting the different varieties on. The basis of that tree is a seedling of a malgoba. So it was actually one of the very first mango trees brought into Florida. I believe there were about 5 of them at that time. Somehow we ended up with one, and then there's another 4 or 5 down around the Miami area at one time anyway. And then it also has some Tommy Atkins grafted onto it. So there's a branch of the Malgobas, and then there's some Tommies. Because it's so old and we love it, we don't trim it. So it's huge. It's really huge. We can't spray it. We can't pick it. Um, but it does produce fruit, and the squirrels and the buzzards appreciate its offerings.
Well, your comment there just transitioned into another question that came from YouTube. Are there
Okay.
any animals? And if you want to walk your way over to maybe the curry, because we have a few extra minutes while we're answering. So are there any animals that you commonly have a problem wanting to eat the avocado and the starfruit?
The avocados, now they don't mess with them on the tree, but if they fall on the ground, buzzards are a big fan of avocados. Um, it's the only fruit I've really seen them eat. Squirrels can be a challenge with any fruit, and raccoons can be a challenge with any fruit. We try to keep them off the farm. So those are the biggest challenges is the kind of rodent varmint types. We're very fortunate that we don't have the large iguanas out here. But I understand from some of my customers that they do like to eat the little mangoes and possibly the avocados.
So a question early on came on of
Mhm.
what is everything that you grow on your farm, whether it's just something that started growing, you don't sell it, but what diversity do you have there on your farm?
Oh, we have a lot. And some of it are things that we sell. Some are things that we have one or two trees of so that people can see them when they come to visit or when we do tours, especially with kids, we like to show them. Like we have like an Aki tree, we have a Jabadakaba tree, we have a Suriname cherry, we have dragon fruit, we have, and those are basically just like little demonstration trees so people can see what they look like, what the fruit looks like. We don't harvest the fruit, we don't sell the fruit. Um, in most cases, we don't really, um, manage those trees at all. We do have some other crops that we have grown or do grow because it's always a shift financially trying to stay afloat. Um, this is curry leaves. This used to be a big crop for us. It's currently quarantined, so we can only sell it in the state of Florida at this time. Um, so while we still have the plants here in hopes that one day that goes away, it's not nearly as big of a crop for us now as it used to be. We do have some kaffir lime trees that we sell the leaves and sometimes the fruit off of. We have neem trees we sell the leaves off of. Um, we have some pond vines. We sell the leaves off of those. And in the last few years, we have developed a very strong market selling the actual leaves off the mango trees. They use them for decorations. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of individual plants. I probably can't remember. Like there's a tamarind tree and but all those little sample plants. There's a bunch of those.
And I believe you said at the beginning that you had about 60 acres.
Mm-hmm.
How many trees roughly do you know is on that acreage?
Well, I can tell you there's about 4,000 mango trees. And then there's, I think, about maybe 200-ish on the sapodillas right now, 80 something on the lychees. I don't have a count on the avocados, the way they're spread out. Um, a little less than 100 on the avocados, I would say.
Mrs. Paul's class asked what the curry leaves are used for, and if you want to get into that versus the spice, but also you mentioned that they're quarantined and can't be shipped out of Florida, and I don't. What does that mean as well?
Um, well, way down the line in their genetic history, they are distantly related to citrus. And because of the challenges that the citrus industry is facing right now with their diseases, they just quarantined everything that is in some way related to them. Um, and so that's how they got quarantined. They don't suffer from greening or anything like that, but because they are distantly related, in an attempt to try to help keep that disease from spreading across the country, they just quarantined it, everything. Um, in terms of how they're used, it's a culinary spice, um, and our customers are mostly people that grew up or their families came from India, and they prefer to cook with the fresh spice as opposed to the powder. The flavor for curry actually comes from the oil in the leaf, and that doesn't dry very well. So in the curry spice and the powder, it's actually like a mix. It's like the closest you can get if you need to travel with it. But the flavor for true curry comes from the leaf, and you can either cook with it like a bay leaf, and um, sometimes I'll throw one kind of like in the oil and or the whatever the uh, dish is, and let it cook and then pull it back out. Or the center stem is kind of woody, but the leaves themselves are tender. So you can also just take them right off, and you can throw that in your rice dish or whatever, and they'll cook up nice and tender and just spread the flavor through. So they can freeze them. It turns black in the freezer, but the oil is preserved as opposed to when it's dried.
Okay, a few more questions. We've got about
Mhm.
15 more minutes. Um, this this is a question about the upkeep. How do you know when you need to feed the trees and give them nutrients?
Well, it's a combination. One, we do some things on a schedule that we know are going to be an issue with the avocados because we're on the muck. The only thing that we really provide to them are micronutrients. They have plenty of nitrogen and everything right in our soil, so we do provide them with micronutrients. Also, when you're growing anything, they call it scouting. Basically, you look at the tree, you look at the leaves, and if they show a deficiency in something, then you add that in. So that's an ongoing process all throughout the year.
How do you imagine farming changing over the next 10 years with climates changing, hurricanes, more people moving in, that kind of stuff?
The biggest challenges I think that we're going to face, I mean, weather is always an issue. It comes and goes and seemingly in cycles. It gets a little hotter, it gets a little colder. The biggest challenges we seem to be facing are competition with communities for water. We also have people that keep moving closer to farms and they don't understand what that is until they get there, and then they're not happy with the noise or the dust or whatever. So that's if they want to continue to have local food to eat, they need to be aware of what it takes to produce that food. That's a challenge. The inputs, like right now, just like with everything else, trying to get a hold of products, trying to get bags, trying to get fertilizers, trying to get um, the challenges everybody's having getting products right now are impacting us, and the cost of those impacts and the cost of minimum wage. That's one of the biggest challenges in when your competition is in Mexico or in other countries. Our inputs in labor are huge by comparison. And getting people to actually want to come and work on a farm is a challenge in all of agriculture. It's nice to be outside, see what you're accomplishing, see what you're doing during the summer, particularly. But it gets hot being outside, and it is a hard job. So
How
finding people
many,
to do it.
you said that it's a family farm and it's been
Mhm.
in for multiple generations. So how many people do you have working on your farm at any given time?
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why we have products that stagger in their season, so we can try to keep as many people year round as possible. Like today, I think we have probably 5 people plus family. During the summer, during mango season, our big time is when we're the busiest, and then maybe 15, 20 people. So it's still pretty small.
Okay. Well, we're getting to that point where we're gonna wrap up and give a few announcements. So, can you just finish off with why do you do what you do? Do you enjoy it, and what is your takeaway that you want everybody to kind of get?
I do enjoy it. Actually, I initially didn't plan to live and work on the farm. I moved away, went to school, grad school, not in agriculture. Um, and I didn't enjoy spending my days creating papers that went into file cabinets. Um, I liked coming back to the farm and producing something. And then I also have really learned over the years how important for people the enjoyment of food and also nutrition and health. And yes, you're not going to survive off of an avocado alone, but the health benefits of having a diverse diet and eating lots of things, I've really grown to appreciate that over the years. And I enjoy being able to contribute to that. Um, so that's we like making people happy. We find customers that grew up in Florida and they've moved to Michigan and they can't get Florida avocados and they find us online and they get so excited. It just it makes my day. So that's why I do it, and we just love what we do.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to show us and to show all the classes out there. We had some classes from other states as well, not just Florida, because we have definitely a unique agriculture industry here in Florida with all the different the climates that we have. We wanted to
That's
let
great.
everybody let you know that we have another farm tour coming up December 8th. So please join us then. We're going to learn about the Seminole tribe of Florida and how they started our beef industry and their history here in Florida. So more information about that, please do the post survey, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you guys for joining us and spending some time with us.